Welcome to Module 12. You guys have made it to the end of the semester. This is our last module. Now, there are a lot of slides, but we are going to try to move right along. Okay, so today's objective, there's only one. We are going to cover ELL strategies, and there are a lot of them. Okay, so teaching strategies are instruction methods, learning activities, and materials that are used to help actively engage students. Okay, so you could just lecture students and not really use any teaching strategies, but the chance of them achieving or mastering all the information is low. We know as teachers, when we use teaching strategies, we know that it promotes mastery and it promotes achievement. Okay, so there's a big difference between just lecturing students and then using strategies like tools to helping the students master the content and retain the content. Okay, so teachers have to intentionally choose strategies that will work in particular situations and for specific students. So not all strategies work for all students. For example, if you have a new English language learner and they're not able to write, using a graphic organizer where they have to write is not going to work for them. So you would have to modify it. You could have them draw pictures instead, or you could have them verbally share with you the information, and you could use it and you could write it or draw it in a graphic organizer. So teachers have to pick and choose from different strategies. However, the strategies that we're going to cover today are tried and true strategies. These are strategies that teachers are using in classrooms that teachers know they work. And so um, if I was you, I would add some of these strategies to my resource portfolio and think of strategies as tools that can help your students master the content. So you pull out different tools in different situations. Okay, so we are going to work through this. The first strategy is the use of visual aids, and we've covered this in many modules. I have some examples though to show you. So visual aids make learning easier because students are able to visually interact with pictures and images. Okay, and some ideas are graphic organizers, diagrams, semantic mapping, KWL charts, Venn diagrams, flow charts, flashcards, and even videos. And they're just an additional resource to what you're using in your class, additional resource to the output that students are receiving. Okay, so the first example are graphic organizers. This is a story map where students will use to track the story elements that are in a story. So if you read Students of Fairy Tale, they're going to use this graphic organizer to list the characters, the setting, what the problem was in the story, and what the solution was in the story. This is a different graphic organizers. There are so many different graphic organizers, and there's lots of different computer programs so that you can create an original graphic organizer if you would like. Now, we've talked about this before. Teachers don't like to reinvent the wheel, so you can search Pinterest, you can search Teachers Pay Teachers to find graphic organizers that will work for you. And we've learned about graphic organizers a lot in this class. And graphic organizers are so important because they help students organize information. And when students are able to organize information, they're able to retain it longer. These are diagrams. And diagrams, to me, are kind of like graphic organizers. They help the students organize information and they label things. They show things in its context, but then with a label. So this is a cell and each part is labeled. This is the food pyramid, and it's graphically organized because you can see how the bottom is larger, and then you're supposed to have more servings, and then the servings get smaller as it goes up, just like the pieces of the pyramid get smaller as they go up. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you are just some more visuals that you can have in your classroom. I really like this math visual about finding area and then the perimeter. So that makes the vocabulary so concrete, and students are likely to be able to remember the vocabulary and to be able to use it and connect it to um, other topics in math. The next the the visual on the other side is for summarizing. So this provides scaffolds for students who are going to be summarizing something. So it would be like somebody who is the main character wanted to do this, but then, so then. So this is a graphic organizer to help students summarize. And this would be a scaffold for students. So eventually, you would want students to be able to read a text and summarize without this scaffold. But before students are independent, they need support, and you would provide this as a support, as a tool, as a strategy for students. Okay. The next chart are our power words. I think we did that 2 modules ago. These are strategies that students need to be able to do across different content areas. And so this is an anchor chart that you would use in your classroom for students to access. You would teach them how to access the anchor chart in hopes that they will be able to use it independently. So if students are, let's say, reading directions for an assignment, and in the directions it asks them to describe something. If students can't remember what describe means, they might think, oh, but that's on our anchor chart. And they would look on the anchor chart, find the word describe, read the definition, and then hopefully they would be able to complete the task. So teachers provide anchor charts as resources for students. Remember, anchor charts should always be for the students. So in my classroom, my anchor charts have very little writing on them, especially at the beginning of the year, because our students are not independent readers. As the year progresses, they start to have more and more writing on them. The students begin to recognize words by the beginning sound, and then by the end of the year, they can remember words that we frequently read. So anchor charts are for kids. Anchor charts should be tailored to kids, not just look cute. The next anchor chart is for vocabulary. And I really like this anchor chart, first of all, because I use it in my classroom. Second of all, because it becomes predictable for students. So once you use this anchor chart 3 or 4 times, students know how the anchor chart works. So they know that the top will be the new word, and then they'll know at the middle is always where they find the picture, and then they know at the bottom is the definition. So I really like this chart because it becomes predictable for students to follow. The next visuals are semantic maps. And semantic maps help students group words and ideas together. So in the middle is the word sports, and then it has different branches off of it. So it has swimming, golf, hockey, baseball, soccer. Those are all different sports. And then off of those sports, there are other words that are off of those sports. So off of the word swimming are the words strokes and bathing suit. Off of the word hockey is the word puck and stick. You can make semantic maps to help students connect topics, connect ideas. And what I really like about semantic maps is beginning students can use pictures instead of words, but they can still see how things are related. Okay, the next visual is a KWL chart, and we talked about those in module 11. And these are two different ways to do the KWL. So the first way, this way over here, this is a worksheet. And this is definitely for older students. They can use this independently. This group of anchor charts are probably for older students because I see that they've written independently. The teacher didn't write these things, but it's tracking the information. What do we want to know? What do we wonder? And this is cracking me up at the bottom. What we learned, I didn't see that before. That's an error. I'm not sure what teacher created that, but that's interesting. Anyway, still the same idea. Students are able to think about what they already know about something, and then what new questions or new ideas do they want to learn about. And then they track that we did learn about this. I think it'd be kind of cool to move the post-it notes on the what we wonder chart to what we learned. And maybe they could write the answers underneath. So I really like that idea. Okay, so this is a Venn diagram, and Venn diagrams help students to compare and to contrast. Students have to learn this in a scaffolded way. So you couldn't just start to, you couldn't just have give students a Venn diagram and expect them to know how to compare and to contrast something. So you might want to scaffold it and start with teaching them how to tell how things are different. And then maybe an activity, how are these things the same? And then add those two things together. So this is a blank Venn diagram, and I've also provided pictures of two different worksheets. The one with the pictures is something that you can use with younger students because they don't have to read. They can use the pictures. So they are sorting and classifying which animals live in the water, which animals live on land, and which animals can go from the water to the land. So this is teaching students to compare and to contrast. The same thing with the following worksheet. It's just for older students as they have to read. Okay, so the next strategy that we're going to talk about, and we talked about this also in module 11 when we learned about the components of the SIOP model, the importance of providing background knowledge for students. So we think of background knowledge as a bridge, and the bridge connects and supports what the students already know to their new learning. And we know that when we provide background knowledge for students, um, their ability to recall and retain the information is increased. Now, there were three ways to provide background knowledge in this chapter, and I thought they were pretty interesting. So we are going to go through those three ways. So the three ways or the three types of connections are a personal connection, that is connecting information to yourself. The students will connect the information to them. So you might hear the students say something like, I already know about this, or I have that at home. I've done that before. I saw that on TV. I read a book like this. Students are connecting what they're learning to their personal experiences. The second type is an academic content connection, and the teachers are applying an academic skill to another academic skill or something that they're learning more about. It might also be a spiral, so where you learn a basic skill and then you use that skill to learn another skill. An instructional connection is where the teacher creates a connection for the students to something that they're currently learning about. So we're going to look at some examples of ways to provide background knowledge for students. So this is just an example of text connections for students, and I put an example of text to self connections. So when students read a story, they should be able to connect with the text in some way. So this worksheet helps them to be cognizant of that. So this happened in the story, and something similar to that happened to me. Or this character was sad and I felt sad when this happened to me. The next worksheet expands on that. So it's not only text to self connections, but students begin to make text to text connections. This book is like this book because, and then the last one is a text to world connection. The students are able to take a text and to take it outside of themselves, outside of the classroom, and how does that text connect to the world? Okay, so that might be an example, like if the students are reading a book about something that's contagious, they might connect it to coronavirus and what's going on in the world now. Students need to be able to make connections. When we make connections, that increases comprehension. So this is the second type of connection, which was the academic content connection. And I thought about how we scaffold skills and spiral skills for students. So like the first anchor chart would be something you would see in a kindergarten, first grade classroom, second grade classroom, where they're learning about story elements. They are able to identify characters in a story. They're able to identify the setting in the story, and the problem and the solution. As students get older and they um, become more rigorous writers, they're going to use those skills of identifying character, setting, problem, and solution to start to be able to create a plot when they're writing. And when they create a plot, they know they need to start with introducing the characters and the setting and what's the problem in the story. And then they're going to increase the suspense. And then they will conclude with some type of resolution. So students, in order to work on how to create a plot, teachers may connect it to students' prior learning of learning how to identify the characters in the story and learning how to figure out where the setting is. And the last one is instructional connections. And like I said earlier, that's where teachers create a connection for students to the content that they're studying. So these are pictures from my classroom, and we learn about community helpers in kindergarten, and we had some community helpers come visit our classroom. So this is a police officer that came to visit our classroom, and this is a hairstylist that came to visit our classroom. So we actually created a connection for the students. So the next time the students learn something about a community helper or a police officer, they may say something like, oh, there was a police officer that came to our classroom, or we met a hairstylist in kindergarten. She taught us about taking care of our hair. So we created this connection for students. Okay, the next strategy that we are going to go to is pre-teaching. And students, teachers use pre-teaching before an activity begins, and it's commonly used with vocabulary. That most pre-teaching strategies will involve vocabulary. Pre-teaching gives ELLs the confidence to engage in the activity. It kind of gives them time to process the concept and to um, bring to the forefront the vocabulary that they might need to speak and to describe the things and to be able to offer output. And it helps them comprehend what they're going to be learning better. It also helps the teacher gauge what the students already know and where their misconceptions might be. And pre-teaching can be done in different ways. Pre-teaching can be done in small groups, pre-teaching can be done in whole groups. If you have a group of students that you know really struggle with vocabulary, you may even start pre-teaching them 2 lessons before the rest of the students. Like I said earlier, teachers are able to use these tools to help the students in the way that they need to be helped. So not all students require the same tools. So that's why teachers have to intentionally select strategies. So one strategy that I use for pre-teaching is labeling. And here's a worksheet to label plants, and then there's a worksheet to label parts of the water cycle. So as I said on the slide before, pre-teaching usually involves vocabulary, and these labeling activities do just that. They easily provide vocabulary support for students. Let's look at the plant worksheet a little closer. Um, so I would start off a lesson with maybe having students label the parts of a plant. I'm doing several things at this point. That would be building their background knowledge. So I would be seeing what do they already know about plants and what are their misconceptions about plants. Students may not be able to differentiate between a leaf and a petal of a flower. So this is going to help the teacher gather information about what needs to be taught. So I may label this plant with the students, and then it provides a frame of reference for the students as I begin to teach them about the actual parts of a plant. Another pre-teaching strategy is categorizing. So this is just pictures that students could cut out, but it could be objects. And you would let students, give the students the objects or give the students the pictures and let them sort it the way that makes sense to them. And then you would ask the students about their thinking. Why did you group these things together? What do they have in common? Why did you put these things over here? And so it's interesting to see what the students are able to come up with. And it gives you an idea of what they already know about the information. And they start to come to some pretty cool conclusions. And then also, you can also refer back to this sort or to the categorizing activity as you progress through the lesson or as you progress through the units. So from looking at the pictures, these pictures are pictures of different states of matter. So there's liquids, there's solids, and there's gas. But students may put things that are cold together. So they may put the milk, the water, the juice, and the ice together. And they may say, these are all cold. And then they may put things that they say are hard together. And so eventually you'll work through this as a class and you will help them to organize it um, in a way that goes with the lesson, but it's always beneficial to the students to be able to categorize on their own first. And you get to see their thinking because some students might get it correct and be able to categorize it the right way. So you want to know what students can do that, what students were not even close, but then you want to understand their reasoning. Why did they sort the things the way that they did? The next example, this slide is for pre-teaching writing. And so when students are going through the writing process, we teach students how to write different genres, but we always model the writing first. So in my class, so I model how to write it, and then we write interactively. That means that we write together. The teacher and the students share the pen. So on this first anchor chart, you can see what the teacher has written and what the students have written. And so that is writing together. You're pre-teaching them how to write this specific genre. So this is informational. You're teaching them how to write the specific genre, but it's not independent yet. Okay. And the next one, the procedural text, are things like how-to books, how-to videos, and cookbooks. Before I let a student independently write that, or before I even model how to write that, I usually bring ingredients in. My favorite thing to do is bring a package of Kool-Aid and some sugar and a water pitcher and a spoon and have the students tell me how to make Kool-Aid. And they always say, put the Kool-Aid in the pitcher. And I take the whole packet and put it in the pitcher. And then they say, oh, you have to open it. So that is kind of pre-teaching them, giving an idea of what it is that we're going to be doing. And so this is another strategy that you can use during the writing process. Okay, so vocabulary connections. Vocabulary connections are connecting new words to words that the students already know. And naturally, this increases the students' vocabulary. Some easy ways to do this is by finding synonyms, antonyms, homophones, and homonyms. We've already covered a lot of these, so I'm just going to show you a few graphic organizers and we'll keep on rolling. So these will be a part of a vocabulary journal, and it exposes the students to not just the main word that they are adding to their vocabulary journal, but it exposes them to so many more words, which increases their vocabulary. The next strategy is modeling. Modeling is where the teacher demonstrates, that means shows, not tells. The teacher shows the students exactly what they want the students to do. It's very explicit, and the students observe the teacher. This is a short video about modeling. You can stop the presentation, watch the video, and come back. Okay, this next slide seems kind of really complex, but it's not. It's just teaching culturally related idioms. So in America, we have a lot of idioms that are not used in other parts of the world. So we have to teach the students the idioms that we use that are part of American culture. And there may be regional idioms that people use. So if you teach students and you know there's regional idioms, you would also want to teach those to students. So the example here is going tailgating. And students might want to know what that means, especially in Kansas City. We just won the Super Bowl. Students have to know what that phrase means, because if they are in a conversation with somebody and they're discussing, well, I went tailgating, students won't know what that means. And so it's important to explicitly teach the idioms that are used in the culture and in the region of where you're located. The next strategy is thinking aloud. And the book talks about it as a reading strategy, but you can use thinking aloud in other content areas, not just while students are learning to read. So when you think aloud, the teacher is making the thinking process, the thought process, um, auditorily available for the students. So it really supports students in learning to make predictions, learning to clarify their meaning when they're reading something, accessing the reading strategies. For example, if a student is reading and they don't know a word, then students need to be able to think to themselves, hey, I don't know that word. I should sound it out. So a teacher will do a think aloud to model that for students. Uh-oh, I just got to a word I don't know. What reading strategy should I use? Oh, I should sound that out. So it's literally saying all of the thought process that's going through your brain to do something. And it's weird at first when you first start doing it, but it works. And so this is a video where she is teaching a group of teachers the difference between thinking aloud and modeling, and how to do a think aloud while modeling. It's a good video. I like that video. The next strategy is thumbs up, thumbs down. That's self-explanatory. Students are evaluating something, and it's such a quick strategy. And some teachers even use thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. And students can use it. It's quick. It takes about 10 seconds, and the teacher can move on. Okay, so we're going to talk about some specific grammar strategies that need to be taught to students. They're fairly simple and they're quick strategies to teach the students. Before we get started with that, I want to remind you of what we learned when we learned about error correction. So, in the communicative learning approach, errors are not the focus of student production. So we want students to be able to communicate, not communicate grammatically correct. That is not the most important part of our student success. So I'm more interested in my students being able to get their idea across compared to their output being grammatically correct. As long as I can understand what the student is trying to say, then I don't need to stop and directly, explicitly address the grammar errors. Okay. However, teachers do teachers don't want to let students just make repeated errors and never say anything. Teachers have to use their best discretion, and it varies based on the student, how long the student's been speaking, the English proficiency level, the age of the student. So always use discretion when correcting student grammar. Remember, we're not focused on perfect grammar, we're focused on communication, negotiating meaning, being able to get your point across, okay? And when students make grammar errors, it might just require a simple recast, or it might be something that you see, hey, they're always making this error. I need to give them some type of explanation to why this is an error and how to correct it. So the first grammar strategy that I want to talk about are teaching signal and transition words. So signal words are like little bridges in text. So that could be in reading, in writing, even in oral language that ties ideas together. It transitions one idea to another. And it also provides comprehension clues for students. So the example that I have below is I went to bed early so I could wake up on time. So the word so in this sentence is a signal word, and it's letting them know that I did this previous thing. So the thing that follows after would happen. So I went to bed early in order to wake up on time. It connects those two phrases together. There are so many signal and transition words. A common one is the word because. And students need to know when they hear the word because in a sentence that something is about to be explained or they're about to be given an answer to something. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide. The next grammar strategy is the pronoun antecedent agreement. And this is something that you will hear ELLs struggle with a lot. So, a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. And antecedent is the word that the pronoun is referring to. So pronouns must agree with the antecedents and they must agree with the gender and the quantity. So the example here is Maddox took his dog for a walk. So that is a pronoun antecedent agreement. It's correct. Maddox is a boy. It's only one, so he took his dog for a walk. If if a student was to say Maddox took her dog for a walk, it would be incorrect. Maddox is a boy. It doesn't agree with the gender. Okay, if it was the word, if the noun was Michelle instead of Maddox, the student would say Michelle took her dog for a walk. If the student said Michelle took his dog for a walk, it would be wrong. The student would say her instead of his because Michelle is a girl. Or if the sentence said Maddox and Michelle took their dog for a walk. So it wouldn't make sense if the student said Maddox and Michelle took us dog for a walk, but that's something that you would hear an English language learner or even a young student that's in error that you would hear them make. And it's a simple correction. It's quick, it doesn't take time. You would say, oh no, you don't say Maddox took her dog. You would say Maddox took his dog because he's a boy. And then you just move on. Okay, the next grammar strategy is using the suffix ed and ing correctly. So ed and ing change the tense of a verb. We add ed to the ends of verbs that happen in the past. We add ing to verbs that are happening right now. So, two examples. Yesterday, I baked cookies versus I am baking cookies now. ELLs tend to overgeneralize, and once they learn to add EED, once they learn to add ED to the end of words, they'll start adding it to every verb. And so they need help with being able to decipher something that happened in the past, it already happened, or something that's happening now. And the last one is using prefixes and suffixes to create new words. So there is a base word and you can add a prefix or a suffix and it completely changes the meaning of the words. And students need to be aware of common prefixes and suffixes because they can figure out so many more words if they know those common prefixes and suffixes. So one that we learned in kindergarten is re. Re means to do something again. So replay means to play again. Rewrite means to write again. I might ask students, using what they already know about the words replay and rewrite, what does the word refix mean? And they might say it means to fix again. So if students stumbled upon the word refix, they could apply what they already know about the prefix re to figure out a new word. And they could even write a new word. Okay, so this is a video about teaching Bloom's taxonomy action words. It's a really good video. Make sure you pause the presentation and watch that video. And I'm going to go through these quickly because, yeah, we've been here a long time. So there's 6 steps, and they increase in rigor as they progress. So they go from lower, less complex thinking skills to higher order thinking skills. So we're going to start with remembering. That's just basic thinking skills and recalling. And if you're giving a task to students where they have to remember something, you might ask them to identify, define, list, name, or state. The next step is understanding. That is comprehending and interpreting something. So you might ask the students to explain, infer, paraphrase, predict, or summarize. The next step is applying. That's using a concept that you're already familiar with in a new situation. So you might ask students to apply, modify, prepare, or demonstrate. Teachers use Bloom's taxonomy to make sure that they are accessing higher order thinking skills. So you wouldn't want to just always ask students to remember or recall. You wouldn't want to always ask students just to explain something. You want students to be able to use these skills to ultimately create something different or to be able to evaluate something or analyze something. Those are the last 3 steps. So to analyze is to break a concept down into parts. So you might ask the students to prioritize or categorize something. Evaluating is making a judgment. Oops, left those words out. Making a judgment about something. So you might ask them to defend something or to recommend or rate something. And then the last step is creating. They're going to put elements together to form a new whole, a new product. So you might ask them to invent something or to produce something or to design something. ELLs need to develop all of these skills. It's natural to stay it's natural to want to stay in the lower order thinking skills because they're easier for students. These higher order thinking skills are more complex. It requires more think time. It requires more access to vocabulary and content area information. It's important that we develop all six of these levels in all learners, especially English language learners. Okay. So the next strategy is making a flip book. You guys probably remember doing these in elementary school or middle school or high school. I think they're kind of outdated. I don't really like to waste paper. I've never used one in my classroom, but it might be a tool that you'd like to use. And then the last one is creating a word wall. And we've talked about the benefits of having a word wall in the classroom, and it's a way to track vocabulary for students. It can be organized alphabetically, or it can be organized by content areas. It can be categorized in different ways. Um, you want to always make sure that you're creating the word wall with the students so the students know what's on the word wall. It can be color coded. And ultimately, you want the students to be able to use the word wall independently. So these are an example of some word walls that I pulled from Pinterest. And yeah, that's it. There's tons of strategies to use with English language learners. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as always. And please stay safe and have a good week.